Hello and welcome to this game review. So in this one we started as an Italian, and here black plays f6, which is already a very bad move because it pushes a pawn for no reason. It opens up this diagonal, so we will not really be able to castle kingside. Also, it takes away a square from our knight. In the opening, the point of our moves should be to develop as quickly as possible. So knight f6 is called for, or bishop c5 and then knight f6, castle as soon as possible and do not waste time. Now f6, knight c3 and castles, and black is always a bit worse because he will have trouble castling and his knight has to go to e7, which is not a very good square. Anyway, bishop g4, bishop h5, and here black plays knight d4. This violates the principle of the opening, which is to not move the same piece twice for no reason, and this doesn't really do much as white can play g4. But even better, white had this nice tactic of knight d4, giving up the queen, and then knight e6. And this queen is actually in quite big trouble. White will be able to take on c7 and then take the bishop, and surprisingly, white is almost winning. Well, if he takes the rook. But this is quite complicated. Instead, g4 is also fine. Instead, black should have just developed his knight. So instead, knight d4, g4, bishop g6, knight d4, queen, knight, bishop d4, and a few moves later, white gets the bishop pair, but this is not the end of the world, as now at least some pieces have been traded, our rook has been opened, so black is almost fine if he can eventually exchange off this bishop. So bishop d5 is played, but this is quite a bad move. Not only can black simply play c6, after which the bishop has to go back, but black even made a better move, which is knight e7 to sacrifice the pawn on b7. I assume black actually just blundered the pawn because I don't think we can calculate this in 6 seconds. And as a general rule, we should not play this quickly. Black was playing extremely quickly in this game. In a 30-minute game, we should have used at least 20 of our minutes by the end of the game. And in the opening, in 15 moves, we should have used at least some time. Here, black was playing all the moves basically instantly. So now rook a7. And surprisingly, black is actually better here, even though he is a pawn down. But the most important part here is the king safety. And white's king has been weakened by this g4 push. And white's extra pawn is this doubled pawn, so it's not very strong. So here, in opposite colored bishop positions, we should aim to attack the opponent's king as quickly as possible and open up the light squares, so f5 should be called for to open up our rook and also get rid of the defenders of the opponent, not to mention allow the queen to enter the game. So after d4, black took this pawn, but this is a bad decision positionally because now black is undoubling white's doubled pawns. Instead, we should play e4, and even though white has more pawns on the queen side, we have more pawns on the king side, and we are able to play f5 next to open up the opponent's king. For example, a4, f5, and white is in quite a bit of trouble, as his king is going to get opened up quite soon. If white takes, after bishop f5, the king is even weaker. So instead, black takes here, and now plays c5, which is a very big blunder, as it gives up a pawn in one move, and also allows a passed pawn after d takes c6. This move is called en passant, and I'm not sure if you knew this one, but if the pawn jumps over a square which is protected on the 5th rank by the pawn on the 5th rank, then white is able to take it, but only for this move, right after queen d2 and some other move, white cannot take it anymore. He could only take it right now. So this would just win the game for white, as now he is 2 pawns up, and there was no reason to give up this pawn. Instead, white took here, and now black is again doing quite well. Bishop f7, now we are aiming for this weakness, and black played rook e7, which is fine, but probably simpler was just rook d7. Attacking this pawn, it is pinned, it cannot move, and the next move black will just take it because there is no one to defend this pawn. Instead, rook e7, g5, but this is also quite a bad move, as it weakens the king for white. It opens this diagonal, and also black can eventually take here to open this line. Black plays rook f8, which is a very good move, aiming for rook e1, starting to attack this weakened king. And this happens, And now black is winning if he brings more attackers to the attack, and with 26 minutes on the clock, we should be able to find a good way to play here. For example, bishop takes d5. This attacks the queen. This involves the bishop in the attack. Next, we can play rook h1, involve the queen one way or another. Or simply queen takes f6, threatening mate in 1 here, or something like queen f3 and rook h1. And white is defenseless against all of these threats. Instead, queen d6 is played in 8 seconds, but this is a horrible move, because now white is winning with a discovered attack on the rook, and that is that. Instead, before making such moves, we should always think about what our opponent is going to do, and what his candidate moves are. So the opponent doesn't have that many moves. So if king g2, bishop d5 is a check and a fork, so this is simple. If f4, then again we can take on d5, and we have improved our queen for free. Queen f4 is not very possible because this bishop is pinned and we will win a rook. So there's not much else. Bishop f4 attacks the queen and the rook. So now black is losing material, and a few moves later white makes a huge mistake, which is queen a6. In general, when we have material up, in this case white, we should exchange as much material as possible, especially the queens, if we have such an unsafe king. And if white had taken here and exchanged these pawns, white would be winning here extremely easily, as the rook and pawn are a lot better than this bishop, and he can just go and pick up this pawn, bring the king slowly, and create a passed pawn and win the game eventually. Instead, the queen goes somewhere on the edge of the board. Now queen d2, where black is attacking, and bishop d5, and f7, but this just allows the king to escape. And a few moves later, white blunders checkmate. At the moment, queen to g3 was already a threat of checkmate, which white does not see. If king h2, black would be on the top, for example, like this. And after, for example, queen f2, we can take this pawn. And black also has a lot of pawns here, and he is attacking. So black is now doing extremely well, especially if he does not exchange queens. But after rook e1, this is checkmate, so eventually black won. But it was a very shaky game, and I think a lot of it could have been played better, especially if we used some of our time. So of course there is always an urge to play as quickly as possible, but to get better at chess, we should dig as much as possible and use as many of our resources as possible, time being one of them.